Say the Semantics, episode 341. It is September 19th, 2025. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit. Recording this on a Friday afternoon / evening. Wanted to kind of hop on before the weekend started. It's been I think just overall, it's been a pretty solid week, I would say. Just sort of like following following up on the past week or so. Like last week was kind of a scramble for me in terms of like my work schedule and stuff. So this week was a bit more of a change in pace in a good way. It slowed down a bit. I was able to catch up on some stuff that I've wanted to. But yeah, hopefully I can kind of I'm hoping that I can enjoy a bit more of a fuller weekend this upcoming tomorrow and Sunday. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Hoping to catch up more on more Blood and Wine, and honestly, maybe even start. I guess my copy of Trails in the Sky is not going to arrive until Monday, so I won't be able to start playing it until next week, which is fine. Like I can wait, but I do want to kind of play it. I kind of want to start it already. This just kind of has me excited. Just want to get my hands on it. But yeah, I think, play through more Blood and Wine, see kind of where, cause there is, as I've mentioned before, there is a ton of content in this DLC. It's just like a whole new area of the game for you to explore, and just based on kind of what I've looked into, this might take quite a bit of time to complete, depending on how I'm feeling. It might be one of those things where I just focus on main story, although the side content does seem to be pretty fun as well. There's like a whole like tournament arc that you're like a part of, a little tourney. It's sort of like you're doing this tourney as a part of a quest, right? And that sort of resolves like a particular issue or whatever, which I think is fascinating, and kind of gives a bit more, kind of expands the world a little bit, gives a little bit more context to who some certain characters in this particular area of the world are like. It gives just more flavor, I think, which is good. But depending on how I feel, I might like, I'll see how I feel about like engaging with the additional side content. I didn't do like everything in the base game. There was a good amount of quests that I didn't do, just because like at that point I was like, okay, I think I had my fill, and I was ready to move on. So I might take like a similar approach with Blood and Wine. I am intrigued by the main plot. It does seem to be interesting, and trying to kind of uncover this whole like murderer going around in Tucson, I think is cool. But yeah, just depending on how I feel about just the how much more Witcher I want right now, which is still a good amount. But yeah, I'm just gonna play it based on just how I'm feeling and everything, right? I mean, that's how I go about things most things nowadays anyway, so it wouldn't really be that too much of a change in pace, because I really do want to get into Trails. I think it feels, I've been talking about games that kind of fit this sort of like fall feeling, that fall theme. Blood and Wine absolutely does that. You know what I mean? Just with the setting, and you're drinking wine in these wineries, and you're just sort of like in this really just beautiful kind of area of the world, and you're out in nature, and you're going on walks in nature and stuff like that. So it does like embody that kind of feeling pretty well. But I do think Trails also has kind of that sense too, in terms of like a bit more of like a, I don't know, like a comfy kind of gaming session. Just like the combination of like the gaming, some of like the side quests that I got, I get a sense like there's, you could really spend as much time as you want kind of going through various stages through the game. Even in the demo, you could really take your time and do things. Like, of course, there's like a limited amount of stuff. So I basically did like everything that I wanted to, other than like over leveling or whatever. But it's like, it's one of those things. I think the game and the series in general is one of those things where it's like you take at your own pace, right? And I feel that kind of fits with, I don't know, for some reason it kind of fits well with this time of the year in a sense, right? There's not really this kind of rush to move on to the next thing. Like you can kind of sit with it and enjoy your time with it. But I really do want to get into Trails. I've after playing the demo, it was just really just exciting to start like a brand new series that I had no real prior knowledge about or prior experience with, and just like more just like JRPG stuff, because I think I'm trying to think, like, when was the last time, like, what was the last game that I like played through that was a JRPG this year? Like, I'm sure I can take a look at my list right now, just to kind of go over the games I have played. I mean, of course there's X, right? Final Fantasy IX. What am I talking about? I literally talked about that game like a month plus ago. So I mean, but in terms of like a new JRPG, it's been a while. It's been a while since I've like X was the last one, which has been a minute. Again, I do intend on going back to that game, but I just kind of want to, I don't know, like I beat the main game. Basically, I beat like the original story's ending of the game, and now it's going to go into kind of the, added DLC portion of it. I don't know what that's going to look like, but yeah, I don't know, just like holding off on it, just wanting to kind of see, just be in the right, I don't know, I just want to, maybe I just want to play other games right now too, but I do intend on going back to it at some point. So yeah, my point really doesn't stick because, yeah, I mean, I played Final Fantasy IX most recently, so I have played something pretty recently. But in terms of like a new thing, it's been quite a while. So yeah, it's gonna be a new adventure and everything. I was thinking about new releases, remakes, that kind of thing, and how I've played. A lot of the time I have, during the course of this year, it's like I have not played, any brand new games necessarily, right? I have not really bought and played any new games on release. Like you could talk about X and how that's, a remake, the definitive edition of a definitive edition and everything, but it's still like an old game, right? The base game is from 2015. And then for Trails, the original game was from, I don't know, 2000, like mid 2000s or something like that, early 2000s. I don't remember. And I don't exactly know the exact date when the original Trails in the Sky came out, but it has been quite some time. So I think it's interesting, my relation to playing older games and remakes of games. I think the fact that I'm able to do so is quite nice, right? The fact that I'm experiencing these games for the first time, without having that kind of maybe nostalgic connection that maybe other people have, I think is I don't know, it's kind of it's sort of like a perspective where I don't have, I'm going into it with like a fresh lens. I don't have some like preconceived notions of a game or whatever based on the reception. Like, of course, those are things that I do pay attention to, but I don't let that necessarily affect my my overall kind of impressions of a game. I think I've gotten a lot better about like not, I don't know. I think I've gotten pretty good about like not feeling like, oh, I have to like this game because other people have liked it, or I have to dislike this game because other people have disliked it. just going into games with just like something where I don't have to feel like I'm enjoying the game for myself and I'm not enjoying it because other people enjoyed it. I mean that's it's kind of like a something where your personal experience with a game is kind of like the most valuable thing in a lot of ways, right? And I think going into these kinds of games where I don't have a history with them, I think is I think is fun. I think it's fun to kind of embark on these like different and going into like these different series. Like I intend on going, like this year, I started The Witcher. I fully kind of got into it. I've had experience with the series in the past with watching the Netflix show, but only a little bit. So I was really able to kind of enjoy these things without the kind of the I don't know the veil of like a preconceived notion of what other people have already kind of said about the game, what other people have said about the series. Like, of course, I've heard great things about all of these things, which is what made me want to pick up the game. But I was less. It was less about letting those others' opinions influence my kind of expectations for the game. You know what I mean? Like I'm really trying to go into things without too much expectation. Of course, like it's good to have like reviews and have some idea of what to, what it's going to look like, but I think it is good to not be affected by those things, because then you can enjoy yourself so much more, right? And I'm, I know that I've been talking about just like remakes and stuff. I don't know exactly know what my point is there. I think it's just more like I'm really just like not. I don't have to have this like pressure of like, oh, this is going to be like the greatest thing ever, because while other people might say that, I like the idea of what a game presents. There's like a sense of like curiosity that I have going into a game. I'm curious about the game because of maybe the ideas that it presents. In the case of Trails, like I've always been curious about the series because of the just interconnected storylines and the fact that there is just like this long running story that takes place in a single world, and how characters from the older games appear in the later games, like, and then the fact that there is like a bit more of some interesting storytelling that's going on that we might not typically see, or I haven't typically seen in the other games that I have played. So those are all kind of pieces that have intrigued me, right? But it's less about like, I don't know. I'm trying to make it less about what others have said and been like, oh, this is like the greatest thing ever, and more so like the intrigue of the storytelling and the world that presents is what is ultimately appealing to me and draws me into a game, right? And so that's kind of like I'm really trying to go into things with that sort of like mindset, and that's really helped me kind of experience these games in a really novel way and really like a fresh way, without having to without having to like rely on other people to like give, to determine whether I like something or not, right? I think, and I've been talking like a good amount, just after Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, after that was announced, like I talked about Fire Emblem Engage and the fact that I haven't played that yet. I think part of me, and this is something that I'm trying to sort of think about a little bit, is where I'm like going, I already have like a just like an idea of what the game is going to be, because I've read all of these comments about the game and the fact that the story is bad and the characters are not interesting and they're all like one note or whatever. And unfortunately that has like influenced me for not giving the game a chance, right? I mean, it's absolutely fair to not want to, not want to play a game that I'm not particularly interested in because maybe the story isn't all that. But I think, considering it is from a series that I have historically liked, most of the game, like, I mean, all of the games that I've played, I've thoroughly enjoyed, except maybe, Fates is a bit iffy, but everything else, like Awakening, Echoes, Three Houses, like all of them I've enjoyed. I love Awakening. I love Echoes. And I really like Three Houses, even though I haven't done all of the routes. But because of this backlash, because it is such a, it is such a sharp tonal shift from Three Houses to Engage, I think is what put off a lot of people, right? There's, that put people off. I think also the initial leaks that came out about the character and their hair, and they have this like crazy color scheme of like blue and red hair, right? It's a little, it can be a little bit I don't know, it might be kind of pushing your buttons a little bit because it's not something that you're used to, right? You expect one thing, you got used to what this series may have presented in the past, and they go into a completely different sort of like character archetype / character design, and I think that threw off a lot of people, myself included, right? So it's, I still have these reservations about the game, but I'm feeling a lot more open-minded about giving it a shot sometime in the future, right? I don't know if it's something that I would want to prioritize right now because there are other games that I want to play, right? Obviously, as I've laid out, but I think I'm trying to let go of some of those things. Like I think it's fair to expect something from a game and be disappointed by it. But I do think that, especially for myself, someone who like cares deeply about games and cares deeply about, particular series and stuff like that, I think it's like, I don't know, maybe I'm doing a bit of a disservice not trying it out at least. I think you could absolutely make the argument. It's like, hey, listen, I just don't want to spend my money on this. Like, that's totally fine. I just think in my case, like, because I'm willing to try out, and I'm a lot more willing nowadays to try out different things. I feel it might be just worth giving a shot. I think one of the things that might be sort of this pressure for me to like not, pressure on me for not wanting to play Engage is having like a sense of this like buyer's remorse kind of thing. You know what I mean? Where it's like, it's like buyer's remorse / like a cost sunk fallacy type of thing, right? It's like, I bought the game, I regret buying the game because I don't like the story, I don't like whatever, I don't like a lot of things about the game, but I have to play this and I have to beat it because I spent all this money on it. You know what I mean? Like, those are things to factor, right? So it's like, it might just be better to just not buy the game altogether, right? If you have all of these things that are, affecting you, like, really the biggest argument is just the time, like, I mean, that's kind of the thing for me. Just putting a lot of the other things aside, it's an interesting sort of thought experiment to think about, do I feel like I'm giving this game, Fire Emblem Engage, a fair chance because of what other people have already said, or am I just evaluating how I want to spend my time? You know what I mean? It's probably a combination of a lot of things. But I think, I mean, especially nowadays, like the conversation about gaming is so heavily tied to the monetary value of it. The fact that it is pretty expensive in a lot of instances. I've talked about it in the past regarding how there are, if you want to experience the like the, the newest and greatest hits of this year, like you really have to consider shelling out a good amount of money. When in reality, like, you don't really have to do that. You can be patient. Like, there are plenty of other games that are available, like on Steam. There are a lot of cheap and free games that are available there. So like, just having kind of that optionality, I think, is really important nowadays because of, how expensive things are. You're not gonna be spending all this money on something that you don't value. I spend money on games because that is like one of my main hobbies. That is something that I enjoy. I enjoy talking about them. I enjoy playing them. I enjoy experiencing these stories and, trying out different gameplay styles. Like, those are things that I find a lot of joy in. So I feel justified in making purchases, but for other people, it's a lot different. So I think in my case, when, if a new game comes out from one of my favorite series, and, based on the reception, it doesn't live up to the, the expectations for the rest of the series, that is something that I have considered in not purchasing a game, right? But on the other hand, if it is something that I really truly want to enjoy, I really enjoy tactics. Like, I really enjoy, like, the tactics aspect of Fire Emblem. Like, I loved going through Awakening the second time on like a hard difficulty, so that, like, my units don't die. Like, that was like one of the more satisfying gaming moments, and that has sort of carried through each of the other titles, right? Where you want to, like, conserve all of your units, and try to, make sure that everybody lives through the end of your campaign, like, and being careful about, like, the decisions that you make, where you're placing your characters on the grid. Like, those are, like, the moment to moment gameplay aspects that I really enjoy. And based on what I heard, maybe a little bit of, going back to taking what others have said, the gameplay aspect of Engage is really great, is really fun. And that is something that I'm really interested in. But because of the other aspects of the game, again, the stories, maybe the characters, whatever, I'm kind of reserving myself from that. But I don't know. It's just something that I'm kind of thinking about. I don't really have like a I don't have like a good definitive answer for what I'm feeling necessarily, but it's more so like I'm just sort of like re-evaluating the thoughts that I have had about prior games, about things that have maybe a particular, maybe certain people have like a particular idea about that, and not try not to get too influenced by that. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard. It's really hard to, like, not go into something that you might be interested in, without having having other people's conversations in the mix. It's almost impossible in a lot of instances unless you just don't engage with any of that at all. But if you're someone who is, like, hyped about and wanting to get excited about your favorite series, you're more likely than not going to be, in the subreddits or on like Twitter Spaces or whatever, like, talking about your favorite game. I don't know. Like, those are just kinds of ideas, right? But I think, the best way I think that I've gotten better with when going into a game is, still regard still take into consideration maybe some of the reception for a game, and, see what that looks like. Because I do think that is important, but don't get influenced so much to the point where where you're not giving the game a fair chance necessarily, right? I think is sort of where my head is at. Again, you still have to value the time that you spend on a game. Like, those are things that you also have to take into consideration as well. But it is something where I'm just kind of like especially with Engage. Like, you know, I don't really feel that strongly about like other games necessarily, but it's more of like a thought experiment with Engage, where I am trying to consider like, have I given this game a fair shot, without, you know, not really playing it necessarily, but have I given it a fair shot by even thinking about it, right? That's kind of where I'm at. And I do crave that. I do crave the tactics RPG aspect of it, which is like one of the funnest parts about Fire Emblem, right? Like, you spend, you know, I think in a lot of instances you spend more time in battles than in any other aspect of a game. So it's like, why, you know, the story is good, you know, and you know, I guess like it's pretty good in most of the games, in most of the Fire Emblem games that I've played, but it's not like, you know, that's not like taking up like, I don't know, it's not like 60% of the time you spend playing a game. That's maybe like 20% of the time, right? If I go back to Awakening, I'm thinking back, the majority of the time I've played that game was in the grid battles, right? Like, was trying over and over again the maps because I kept losing a unit. Like, those are the things that I found joy in. Like, that was like what made the game for me. So like, why wouldn't I, you know, apply that same logic to Engage, if that's the fact, right? So I'm honestly like convincing myself more and more to try out Engage, because I'm just craving Fire Emblem, you know. I think I kind of want to play it now. Not right now, but I do want to play it, maybe before, who knows when I play it. But if the game goes on sale, or if there's like a cheap version I can find, like a used copy, I might give it a shot. Honestly, I think I might, just because I love Fire Emblem, you know. Like, it's like I feel I really want to. I've missed it. Like, I haven't played it in so long. I haven't played Three Houses in forever. I did get, again, I'm kind of repeating what I've said before, but I did get the additional routes for Fates, the Conquest route and then Revelations. But I don't know. Do I want to go back to Fates, or do I want to play something new? Do I want to play Engage? While, you know, it's not new, it is the newest, you know, game in the newest entry in the series. Like, why not try that out? So that's kind of where I'm at. I just think I'm kind of craving that sort of, that gameplay, you know. So like, it's one of those things, like, if the gameplay is enough and fun, I might be able to even just look past the story. Like, it's really not the most, you know, maybe it isn't the most important thing in some instances. So that's kind of what I've been sort of contemplating. Speaking of Fire Emblem, I did see a really interesting video. It was just like a smallish, like, YouTube video, with not, this guy had like, I don't know, like 20 like 20 subscribers, like, but he had like an interesting discussion with like some friends. He said that he was like a project manager, so he said he had some insight in just like the video game industry, which I thought was interesting, or like, you know, like software industry, which I thought was interesting. And he was talking about Fire Emblem 4, Genealogy of the Holy War, which is one of the older titles in the series. And there's been like a lot of rumors in the past few years about the fact that there's a remake for that game coming out, and we've been waiting and waiting and waiting. And he was kind of trying to give some arguments about how the game might have just been canceled, and the potential reasons why it could have been canceled. And I thought it was really interesting. So I'll give kind of like a little rundown of what he was saying and how I kind of agree with his assessment. So he mentioned that, you know, remakes of games in the series tend not to do very well financially. So he pointed out, he gave a, it might have been like the Fire Emblem like wiki or something like that. And it showed the sales numbers for each of the games in the series. So like Awakening was like super successful, and then Fates was very successful. But then when they remade Fire Emblem 2 Shadows of Valentia, it did not sell as well in comparison to the prior two games in the series. And even if you go as far back to like the DS era, where they, I think, remade the very first game of the series, like that sold poorly or didn't sell as well in comparison to the games kind of around it. So there was this kind of like, he was pointing out there was like a trend happening where, you know, the games, the newer games in the series tend to do well in a lot of instances, right? And if you're sort of iterating on a past entry and taking some of those ideas and bringing it forth, for example, Fates took a lot of elements from Awakening and then kind of brought it into it, you know, including kind of the pairing system and the supports and some of the more like social elements of Awakening was brought over to Fates. And either, I don't know, some of them were questionable, but you know, so it's sort of like they sort of like iterated on those past ideas. And considering, if you look at the performance of sales for Engage versus Three Houses, it sold like less than half of Three Houses numbers, because it was such a shift, you know, as I talked about it was such a, you know, shift from the style of Three Houses in terms of the story and all the other things that I've just talked about. And, you know, he mentioned that might have been a bit of like a warning sign, or maybe just like a sign for intelligent systems, that there is like this kind of demand for a particular style of game. Three Houses was one of the most successful game in the series, and you know, you got a spin-off from that with Three Hopes, and you you know, the fact that it was such a departure from that world going into Engage was maybe a bit of a sign that was not exactly what people wanted. I think people that love Fire Emblem went and got Engage, right? Regardless, like diehard fans of the series went to get the series, went to get Engage regardless of reception or whatever. So I think, yeah, I think there was maybe just like a bit of a, you know, a strategic decision in considering approaching other games in the series, including remakes, right? If they had released a game such as a remake of an older game in Fire Emblem 4 Genealogy of a Holy War, it likely would not have performed very well, just based on historical data and based on reception of the series, right? I think if they went ahead with that method, you know, I think it would have potentially turned off a large portion of the new fans of the series, right? Like Three Houses brought in like a ton of new fans that were not familiar with Fire Emblem because of a lot of the elements regarding, you know, the you know, the support and, you know, and the stories and the, you know, maybe I think maybe this kind of the monastery system and that kind of thing, you know, some ideas maybe brought from the Persona series, like that really worked in Three Houses, and that kind of like is what attracted a lot of players who are not familiar with, you know, Fire Emblem or like tactics games in general. And so when you sort of lose that, maybe some of the, you know, lose more casual fans of the series by, you know, kind of like maybe honing into something that those fans are not particularly interested in, say, more gameplay focus, more combat heavy focus versus the other like social aspects that were, heavily prevalent in Three Houses, that might turn off a lot of those fans. And if you kept kind of going in that direction, like, it's a little different because, like, based on what I've heard, genealogy is like a very, heavy story. It's a lot more of like there's a lot more like geopolitics and that kind of thing going on in that game. But it is a older game, and I think that label might be a bit of a turnoff to newer fans of the series because they're not acquainted. They might not be accustomed to that style. When they want to see more of something along the lines of Three Houses, right? Which is why I think they made the decision of pivoting back to that in Fortune's Weave, which I don't think is a problem. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. Obviously, when the game comes out next year, but there's a clear demand for wanting to go back into that world of Three Houses, and wanting to kind of go back to maybe maybe some of those other characters. And I think it would have been a bit difficult to try to sell the idea of this remake after maybe losing some trust in the fans after releasing Engage. You know what I mean? So it's, I would have loved to play Genealogy, and I still hope that it comes out in some way, shape, or form. But I totally understand the reasoning to why this game might have just gotten canned, because looking at like sales data for the series and looking at it historically, it might not have made sense to release the game at this point in time, right? Especially if you're trying to kind of build back some trust with the fans, because it was a pretty significant, like, Three Houses sold like 4 point something million copies, while Engage only sold like 1.6. That's a pretty significant, that's a huge drop off. That's really steep. So it means that like there was like no carryover from that other game. Like there were fans were just not interested, right? Like you lost like more than half of this fan base that you kind of built up. And so the fact that, I think that was probably the biggest thing really to why, the decision making behind, moving into with Fortune's Weave and maybe canceling Genealogy, the Genealogy remake, is because like they need to kind of get back into like the fans' sort of good graces in some ways, right? And so I just thought it was like a really interesting idea, because like I had heard about this remake for such a long time now. Like they had been so heavily hinting at it for, like leakers had been so heavily hinting at it for such a long time. And I was like, we were just like, when is it going to come out? Is it going to come out at like the end of the Switch 1 life cycle? Like that was something that I was I felt like if there was like a timing that worked best, it would have been maybe even last year or, a year plus before that, but it just never came to fruition. Because I think Intelligent Systems, the Fire Emblem developer, they saw the performance, the sales performance of, Engage compared to Three Houses, and they realized they might need to switch something up again, or they need to kind of pivot back to what really worked for them. So it was just like, I don't know. I do hope that Genealogy still comes out in some way, shape, or form, because I think I would love to play that. I would love to play, some of the older games in the series. I thought like the Fire Emblem 2 remake with Shadows of Valentia is excellent. It's awesome. Like it's so good. The story is interesting. I love the two kind of like intertwining stories, if you want to call it that, or like two routes kind of, but you're playing at them it's not like, it's not the thing in Three Houses where you're going on one path at a time. It's like you're like interchanging between Alm and Celica with these two paths that they're going on, and then eventually at the very end they meet together. And then there's some like gameplay stuff that they updated, and it's just fun. It's just like a fun. It's a really fun game. Like maybe gameplay wise, it's not as complex or as inventive because it's a remake of an older game. But I still had a lot of fun with it. So I think if they go in the path of Valentia for genealogy, that would make me really happy. So I hope they do. I hope they do something like that. Again, I totally get the reasoning behind why it might have gotten canceled. Like we still don't know. This is all speculation. We have no actual knowledge on what happened. Like this is all based on just people talking, including myself. But it feels like it makes sense, right? It feels like it makes sense that the game got canceled just because they wanted to focus on the thing that will most likely get more, sell more. And a remake right now is probably not going to do that. So yeah, that's kind of where things are. Again, it would be a shame if it got canceled, but I still hope that it comes out in some way, shape, or form, because I would like to play that. And it's one of those things where I think there's a reason why it's getting remade as well, because it's one of the more popular games in the series. One of the more popular older games in the series. So I don't know. That's just kind of something that I wanted to talk about a little bit and just kind of bring up because I don't know. I've been talking a lot of Fire Emblem recently after the announcement of Fortune's Weave, and I think it's an interesting conversation. I do actually want to continue to sort of delve into some just more Fire Emblem based discussions, maybe talk a little bit more about my history with like the series and that kind of thing, because it's really because I think it's really my sort of introduction to the series and where I've kind of ended up with the series. I think is very I don't know, it's interesting looking back on it, and it's interesting how I've sort of how I've been how I've played the games, and whether in the case of something like Engage, like I haven't played Engage. I haven't like experienced all of the things that I have necessarily. So it's like, do I want to revisit those games? Is kind of like a thing. So I might put a pin in that. Maybe I'll do like a little Fire Emblem series retrospective on my path and talk about that. Just like an idea that I have there. But yeah, just wanted to hop on, talk about some stuff. And I think that's going to do it for now. I will see if I want to record something this weekend, either tomorrow or Sunday, or maybe I'll just wait until Monday. I'll see, what time allows. But yeah, that's just kind of what I wanted to do for today. And that's going to do it for now. All right, recording this on Monday, September 22nd. Nice little afternoon/evening we got here. Still a little too hot for my liking, but just looking ahead, it looks to be cooling off within the next week. I mean, fingers crossed, knock on wood, all that kind of stuff. But it's still a little too hot. But this is how it always is. It's always like this during like September over here. So I don't know what else I'm really expecting, but yeah. So my copy of Trails in the Sky came today, and I was just like, yes. I was like giddy, nothing too crazy, but I was like jumping, and I was like, yes, the cave, it finally. No, I didn't do any of that, but I was I was happy that it arrived on time. I was worried as like the day continued along. I was like, I don't know, man. Packages get lost. I've had some instances where a delivery hasn't arrived and stuff like that, which would be kind of a hassle to deal with. It's not the worst thing to happen ever, but it is kind of annoying. But luckily, it came. It came on time. I think I'm gonna play it tonight, or you know, either tonight or sometime this week. I think what I'm gonna do, my sort of mentality or my approach with gaming, I obviously shift every any time that I talk about it. But I'm thinking what I'm gonna do is I'll probably just kind of play both Witcher and Trails, which, might be a little, I don't know, maybe it's a little counterintuitive. Maybe it's like one thing is taking up the other's time. But honestly, I'm kind of, I think it would be fun to like change up and experience, two different types of like gameplay styles. I was just so digging the combat in Trails, and I've been craving to get into that ever since I beat the demo. And I just really want to play it. I've been really wanting to kind of get into it. Like the demo really sold me on the game, as I've kind of exclaimed a lot throughout the last few weeks. But I think it would also just provide kind of a fresh take on things too. I've been playing, predominantly The Witcher during my free time, over the course of the last month or so when I have had time, most notably on like the weekends. And I think it'd be nice to just sort of switch it up a little bit. You know what I mean? I've been craving a more modern JRPG kind of experience, and it really sounds like I'll be getting that with Trails. And also I think it's good to not rush through with what I have left in The Witcher 3. I think I was playing this weekend a little bit, and I was like stuck on this one quest on this like one enemy. I just kept dying over and over. I looked up some tips on how to defeat it, and I think it was a Reddit thread, or maybe it was like a Steam community thread or something like that. And it was just talking about like, being stuck at like a particular point in the game, and like, how much more left of the game do I have up until this point. And I think one of the comments sort of struck with me, where the goal is not to rush through something necessarily. If you really want to see through to the end, like, then sure, like you could, put in as much time as possible to complete a game. But I do think there is value in having patience, which is something that I've continued to kind of talk about. Being patient for, just waiting for certain games to release, or waiting for the right time to do something. It could apply to a lot of other instances, but in particular with The Witcher 3, I'm definitely not rushing or anything like that. But my thinking was that I was gonna complete, at least, just get through kind of the Blood and Wine DLC and just kind of do all of the main things. But I also, another part of that comment was saying, this will be the last time you'll be able to experience like a new type of Witcher game. And for myself, at least for a long time, until The Witcher 4, and for myself, like, I don't really have an intention on going to, Witcher 1 and 2, because I know those are a bit older. Like, I don't know, from, maybe maybe other people have other things to say, but the mechanics in those games are definitely a bit dated for its time. So I just don't really have this intention on going into that. So really the thing is going to be The Witcher 4, and who knows how long that's going to take. And of course, that's going to be a thing where I will be perfectly fine waiting for it to come out. It's been announced, so it will be coming out at some point. Who knows when? But until then, like, this is the game, right? The Witcher 3, Wild Hunt, and all of the additional content is really the thing that you have at the moment. So I think it's worth just appreciating it, you know what I mean? For myself, appreciating the world, the atmosphere, the, different quest lines, just all the silly shenanigans that you get caught up in, all of the wild adventures that you're sort of brought into. Those are things that I will, like, once I do beat the game and I've sort of had my fill with it, it will be something that I will miss. You know what I mean? Like, there's just something to this game that really, really works in terms of building an atmosphere and just really feeling like you're a part of the world. Like, it really is something special. There's a reason why it's considered one of the greater games that have been made. One of the better open world games, or open world type games that you could kind of slot in as one of the better ones, for sure. Like, the depth of detail that goes into the NPCs, the fact that every line of dialogue is voiced. Like, this is a true kind of like AAA gaming experience, which I'm not usually familiar with, you know what I mean? But I think in this case, it is one that has been done incredibly well. And just all of the accompanying pieces, everything that it sort of brings with the stories and just, just this continuous kind of look at Geralt's character as he embarks on these different adventures, and the choices that you make as the player, and how it impacts the rest of the sub stories and the greater story as well. I think it's just so well interconnected, and it just got me really invested to where I'm now, checking out the books. I'm listening to the audiobooks right now, and having a great time with it, just getting a little more of that, backstory, the stories that happened before, we got to this point in The Witcher 3, but also continuing to kind of explore the humanity with Geralt and his sort of, him trying to come to terms with, himself. I think you get more of that in the book, at least the one that I'm reading. Him just really acknowledging that. I think with The Witcher 3, you get more of like a finalized version of himself, even though he still has these kind of moral, quarrels with himself and quarrels with other people. But I think with the books, you get more of like this kind of introductory period, piece where he's kind of really trying to, wrestle with some of those more, in-depth kind of questions about himself and his role in this world. So, it's just got me really intrigued and invested in this whole universe. And, I do want to kind of take my time with it until it reaches the end, because I know for sure, like, once I beat the game, it's like, dang, it's like, that's it, man. You can't experience it for the first time again. Like, that's just kind of what it is with a lot of these kind of special games, the games that I love, where you know that you just can't experience them for the first time again. It just doesn't, it's just not the same thing. And so I really want to kind of savor that. I have been, but I want to continue to savor that until I've kind of done everything I feel I want to in the game. So that's kind of what I'm thinking in terms of, like, divvying up my time with both Trails and The Witcher 3. I really don't think they're gonna, like, get in the way of each other, because they're so different. I think Trails is a lot more, I don't want to say casual, that I don't know if that's like the right word, but it is less, it's a lot more of like a there's less, there's not as much like weight necessarily. I don't know how to describe it. That isn't to like say the game is more or less important. It's just more like the atmosphere that it brings. Like there's like a kind of like a cozy feel to it. You know what I mean? Just like a, like a cozy JRPG. Obviously, there's mechanics and stuff that you need to be aware of, and maybe there's some more tough gameplay encounters, but it's less. It doesn't. I don't think it asks as much of you in terms of the the moment to moment action, where in like The Witcher you're like constantly like, okay, I gotta go, you got like these quest lines, and you also have to engage with like if you really want to engage with the game, you have to listen to the dialogue. There's a lot of lines of dialogue in this game, so it's just different, right? Like I think Trails, it's not as, and the world is a lot more lighthearted, I feel, as it comes with the more colorful anime palette and everything. So I think kind of it honestly feels like it might go really well, just like kind of going back and forth between the two different games here. So I think that's going to be what I'll be doing. I still have like a good chunk of The Witcher 3. I mean, I feel like I could probably get through it in a weekend or something like that, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take my time with it. And I still have like a decent chunk of the main story to go. I feel it feels like that way, at least. But I have done a ton of side content, and it's been really fun. I mean, there's somewhere it's like pretty ridiculous, like what you have to do. You have to like storm a castle and storm these like ruins to take out these like bandits, and you have these just like all out battles with them, which is a lot. It's fun, but it's also if you die, you have to like restart all over, and you have to fight through them all again, which can be a bit of a pain, but it's still it's still fun. But yeah, that's kind of what I've been thinking. I've been really I've talked last time about Engage and how I haven't really given the game like a fair chance necessarily, right? And just kind of revisiting that a little bit. I know I've been talking a lot about Engage and talking about a game that I haven't played, and I still don't know if I'm going to play or not. But here's the thing. I think this is sort of the real crux of it. It's really simple. I could have all of these philosophical conversations about, am I giving this game a fair chance because of the perceived kind of, interpretation from what other people have given it. This is what it comes down to. It's just time. It's just the amount of time that I can give to every game. And nowadays, I just have to be so much more selective with my time. Like, who knows? Like, maybe like 40 years from now, when I'm like, hopefully retired. Who knows? Like, I'll give it 50. I'll give myself 50 years. When I'm retired. It's like maybe I'll be kind of like old man gaming and going through all the games that I didn't have a chance to go through when I was younger. But that feels, I don't know, that I can't look at it so far ahead in that way. Of course, games are still going to be there, right? I'll still be able to play these older games, older by meaning like, in the future. But it is time though. Like I have to kind of like think about like, what do I want to spend my time on? Like, do I want to spend my time trying out a game, right? Like it sounds like cool, and sometimes there is like there are games where I'm incredibly satisfied with the experience by maybe trying out a game that I've heard is really good, including some of my favorite games now, Slay the Spire, Balatro, those kinds of things, where I just got those games on a whim, and now I've poured in hundreds of hours into them, right? So there are exceptions to that, and of course there are going to be other instances where I just make a bit more of like an impulse buy on a game where I feel it's kind of justified. There's just like a gut feeling that I feel like this game is going to be really good. But in the case of a 40, 50 plus hour RPG like with Fire Emblem, I think the things that I've heard, the criticisms of the game, where you know, if I'm not enjoying the story, and I think this is a conversation that I've already had, but I'm just kind of reiterating this. I'm just coming back to what I said in my conclusion. It's like, do I want to spend my time ignoring a large chunk of the game, right? Like, even, as much as fun as the gameplay might be, it's like, do I want to ignore a huge part of the story? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I'm really wanting to do that. You know what I mean? Maybe I can just look past it and be like, oh, I'm just going into Fire Emblem Engage just for the story, which is like, or just for the gameplay, which, whatever, that might be fun. And who knows, maybe for myself, maybe I end up really liking the game. Maybe I'm like, it's like silly, and maybe it's a little, the storytelling is pretty novice and that kind of thing. But even then, I just think that maybe I'm just like not giving, I don't know if I really want to like necessarily give that like a fair chance. Like, it's kind of like reading a book, like sometimes when I think about going back into something like, something like Game of Thrones, I read the first book a long time ago, but I just don't know if I want to revisit the rest of the series. I kind of know what to expect with with how things go. I don't know like the details and everything, but I'm just like, do I want to kind of like get back into that? It feels like quite the investment, you know what I mean? So I'm not sure. It's just kind of, it's really just a matter of time. You know what I mean? So that's always going to be, if there's something that I'm like contemplating, the answer is going to be time. Like, that's really what it comes down to. Like, how do I manage myself and the limited time that I might have? Like, that's just sort of what it comes down to. So yeah, I think, it's gonna be, I still am not like, I'm not like 100% gonna be like, nah, I'm not gonna play Engage. It is like still on my potential list, but there are still so many other games that I have yet to play that I would probably put ahead of Engage. It's just more like, I've been really missing the Fire Emblem flavor. Like, that's just kind of the real crux of it. But if it comes down to that, maybe I can just be patient and wait for the new game to come out next year. So there's other ways to go about it. Or I can go back and play Three Houses. Or I can go back and play Fates, which I haven't gone through the other two routes in Fates. So I have those options as well, right? And those other games are probably going to be better than Engage as a full package. You know what I mean? Fates might be a little questionable. Fates might be, I don't know. I mean, just based on maybe the stories and Conquest and Revelations are apparently not that great. So maybe I'm not missing out there. But you know what I mean? It's like, I have these other opportunities. Also, if I want like a strategy tactics game, Final Fantasy Tactics, the remake is like coming out. So, I mean, yeah, I'll be playing that sometime. I don't know when, but I will absolutely be playing that in the future. So, if I want like a strategy game, like there's options out there. It's just like a matter of me, craving a particular type of flavor, a particular type of game, and that's just kind of what I was feeling after the Fortune's Weave announcement, right? So that's just that was just sort of like what I was mulling with in my head. But yeah, I mean, it just really comes back down to like, yeah, what do I want to prioritize my time with? And I don't have that much time either. You know what I mean? So, that's where things kind of come down to. So I was just kind of like, I was like thinking about it a little bit. And yeah, it's like if I'm on the fence, I gotta feel a lot more confident than like 50% confidence that I'm gonna enjoy this game. You know what I mean? Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with that. So yeah, just kind of I'll probably be continuing to revisit the engage conversation. I just think it's so interesting because I have enjoyed the series so much up until that point. Honestly, I could make the same argument for Xenoblade 2, where I didn't play it for the longest time because of the reception and that kind of thing. And, you know, when I eventually played it, I was like, oh, this is great. You know what I mean? And now my perception of it has changed again. My feeling towards it have kind of, like, it's gone from, I've just like flip-flop back and forth with Xenoblade 2, where it's like, you know, the very initial impressions that I've heard, you know, people were saying, you know, I was just hearing like, you know, the criticism and how the fact that it's like nothing, it's very unlike the first game in the series, which I loved, and you know, it's obviously one of my favorite games. And it was such like a tonal shift and everything, and how it went more leading into the anime tropes and that kind of stuff, and that really turned me off from it. But I eventually got it, and I did enjoy it quite a bit. But and then now it's like I'm kind of back to the point where I'm like, yeah, it was fun, but also do I want to revisit? There are a lot of gameplay issues. I have issues with the story still. There's a lot of issues, especially with the pacing. The pacing is honestly at moments horrible. Like it is probably the worst paced out of all three of the games. It does pick up later, but like there's a glut in kind of like almost toward the middle of the game where it just stalls, and it's just like, dude, what are we even doing? You know what I mean? What happened to the story? So that's kind of, you know, I Xenoblade 2 might even be worthwhile an examination as well from my perspective. I'll get into that a little bit. Engage, maybe I'll give it a chance. I don't know. Not right now. That's kind of my conclusion. Going back to Xenoblade 2, I was thinking about like maybe just I don't know about not playing the game necessarily, but just like thinking about the game, because it is like for me personally the weakest in the main trilogy, and it is, you know, quite the departure from one, and you know, story wise it is incredibly important in the trilogy, but I just like, you know, as much as I enjoyed my first time playing it, I think, you know, just thinking about the story and thinking about a lot of those kinds of things, there are a lot of cracks. There are particular cutscenes where I like rewatch them, like maybe on YouTube, or like I'll watch like a streamer play, and it's like there are so many, I don't know, there's like a lot of things that I can point to and be like, I don't understand why this character is acting this way. There has been no indication of like them even having a semblance of this. Why are they mad? You know what I mean? Like, and it feels kind of like unjustifiably mad in certain cases. There's one scene in particular that really sticks out to me, and that like honestly kind of gets me mad a little bit. You could talk about all of the other issues, the anime tropes or whatever. I totally get that. I do agree. I agree that those are issues, but I do think there is like one cutscene in particular I have found is like a huge blip. Like it just doesn't work. Like upon second viewing, it just doesn't. It doesn't work. There is like a bit of that kind of trope to it as well, but in a different way. And on it kind of it honestly undermines some of the emotional ties the game has. So I don't know. It is just something that I've been kind of thinking about a little bit for a while, actually. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'll revisit the game anytime soon, but I think it is worthwhile to, because it is like my favorite series. I mean, I love one I love 3. I've talked to death about 3. So it's just so interesting that 2, just everything about the story and the characters is just, I do think that the stronger suit, I mean, the strongest part of 2 is the music. The music and the environments are like the best part about 2, I think. And the characters are solid. The characters are solid too, but I think the story is just lacking a lot, just looking back on it. Like, there are some really good moments. Torna is great, as like the secondary story, the DLC, but yeah, there's a lot of flaws. I think, really looking back on it, there are a lot of flaws. I have seen videos in the past kind of talk about how it's like a game that you love and hate at the same time. For me, I don't love 2. I love aspects of 2. I love, again, I said, the music is probably the strongest in the series, and I do love the world and the environments and that kind of thing, but as a whole, I don't I don't have this as close of a connection to it. I think there are things in the story where it's like, if you tweak this and this and this, like, it would be like the best game in the series, but that just doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense as an argument, because the game is as it is. So if you change it more than it does, it would be a completely different game. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know. It's just like an interesting case study. Games, in my opinion, where it's like black sheep is not the right term, but they're kind of an outlier in the rest of the series. Engage is probably one. Xenoblade 2 is one in Xenoblade. So that's just kind of, I don't know. I think those kinds of discussions are very interesting, because it's like, how did we get to this point? Why is it such a departure from what existed before? You know what I mean? Sure, of course there are elements that are carried over, but it is a vastly different experience in my opinion. So yeah, I don't know. That might be like a fun topic, actually, talking about the outlier game in the series. You know what I mean? And then just kind of discussing why it's an outlier, why it's so different, what makes it maybe not work necessarily, and why it doesn't really work for me in particular. I think those are things that might be worthwhile talking about. I think that might be like an interesting case study. Looking at some of my favorite series and looking at games that are a little different from the rest of the series. It might be worthwhile. Like, I'm trying to think of another example. Zelda, it's probably Zelda 2, right? Everybody talks about Zelda 2. I'm not going to play that game. So that might not be a good example. Dragon Quest, it's kind of hard because they're all pretty uniform in terms of quality. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that might be like an interesting little case study. What is the outlier? Why is this game an outlier in the series? And what makes it maybe not work? Anyways, just wanted to hop on, talk more games. It's kind of where my head's at right now. Oh, quick NBA update. Man, already talking about injuries, and the season hasn't even started. So it's been reported today that Fred VanVleet went out with an ACL tear during like an off-season workout. I mean, it's just like, what is happening? Like, every big player has gone out with an ACL tear. Like, I don't know, I don't want to be conspiratorial, but it's just like, there is something wrong with that. There's something wrong with that. There has to be, I don't know, there has to be some type of examination where it's like, that injury has become so common with the more the higher level players, and I just am like, it's not good. You know what I mean? It sucks, dude. I'm not a Houston fan at all. I don't like the Rockets, right? But I hate to see that shit, man. It's awful. It sucks. It just completely takes the wind out It's what happened like in Game 7 of the playoffs. It's what happened in the second round of the playoffs with Tatum going down. Like, it was just like, dude, like, it just completely takes it's all, it sucks. Like, I get it, injuries happen, all that, but it's like there's gotta be some preventative measures that can be taken to like address this. You know what I mean? I don't know what it is, but it's like this is like one of the biggest issues, I think. You could probably point that to like in football, like injuries being a huge issue. I mean, like, I've heard like a ton of like quarterbacks going out in the last like couple of weeks or something. So it's like, yeah, I mean, football, it's a little more expected, which is not a good thing necessarily, but it's like, you got to look at the play. I mean, they're running into each other like freaking trucks. Like, that's like, what do you think is going to happen? You know what I mean? I think with basketball, I think it's just like the movements that you do. Just like because of the twisting and turning and all the different types and the jumping. There was like so much activity going on with your body. And it's not even necessarily about the physicality between players. It's much more about the fact that you're trying to do all of these different types of movements that I don't think the human body necessarily is like used to. I don't think most people could not withstand the level of play that is required at the professional level. So that just has just major consequences on these athletes' bodies, and I'm sure these things are well documented and researched in a lot of instances, but I do think it's worth. I don't know, like, what, there's got to be something to that looks into, because that really sucks, man. That sucks, dude. Like, I still think like Houston is still going to be a good team, but you're missing your primary point guard. I guess like Reed Shepherd is going to slot in as the one. I mean, he had some moments, but he, for the most part, has not played really significant minutes. Like, that's going to be a huge burden on him as like as a second year player, right? So yeah, I don't know, dude. I don't know. That's just, it's tough, man. And then apparently, like, Tyler Hero is also out with some kind of injury, and who knows how long he's out for. I don't think it's as significant as an ACL tear, but it's just, yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's crappy, man. It really is, like, outside of the outside influences of gambling and all this other advertiser nonsense. I would say, like, within the game itself, within player, within what players are able to do, the worst thing to see are injuries. Hands down. It's not even close. It ruins careers. It ruins franchises. Like, it is the worst thing that happens in sports. And we hate to see it. And I hate how much of, like, sports discourse is around, I don't know, it's like, oh, these players or these franchises are not successful, they just have this, like, generational curse or whatever. And it's like, a lot of those instances are because players have been injured. And it's just like, what are they supposed to do? You know what I mean? I feel there just has to be better management. I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, I have no idea. I don't know anything about sports science and, just like, biological studies and of athletes and that kind of thing. I am not super knowledgeable about that kind of thing, but I feel like there's got to be a re-examination of that, because it's just continuing to happen. Like, we've seen like 5, 6, more, probably even more than that, instances of ACL tears within like the last 2 years. You know what I mean? It's like a freak injury that derails someone's career, but it feels like it's happened more and more. And I think it just has to do with the level of play. The fact that there are just so many things, like, you have to be so good now. You have to be good on both ends of the floor. You have to be a good defender. You have to go through screens. There's just so much movement and action and off-ball action going on. Like, all of these offenses and defensive tactics are so much more complex than they used to be back in the day. Even just watching like footage from the early 2000s, it is so much slower paced in comparison to now. I mean, just if you were just watching the finals this year was crazy. Like, compare that level of play to other moments in the past. Like, it is just the intensity is just up to another level, because they have, like, everybody is so good that it's just like you just can't keep up. And some players' bodies can't keep up, right? Tyrese going out, like, his body, like, you know, it's just like he was playing well, and then obviously that happened. But it's just, I don't know. I think there are things that can be mitigated, and I don't know. I think my biggest thing, the one thing that I feel should be brought up again, which I've talked about on other occasions, is the amount of games in the season. I think there's just too many games. There are way too many games during the regular season. And I just think it is incredibly unreasonable to put these players, like, you know, whatever, they're millionaires. I get that. Oh, some of them even billionaires. I mean, in the case of like LeBron. But it's just not, it's just not sustainable, I don't think. Especially how, you know, just the level of play the sport is at now. I just think it's unreasonable to expect everybody to play 81 games. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't think that's going to change because of the money anytime soon. But I do hope that's something that they look at and consider. Anyways, yeah, just kind of some crappy stuff, some crappy news for the NBA. But season's coming up. We'll see how that goes. It just sucks to see like an injury happen. I mean, it sucks to see an injury period, right? Of that level. Like, he just might be out for the season, which is like, dude, that's absolutely crazy. So yeah, I don't know. Anyways, that's going to do it. That's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for listening, as always. This has been Save the Semantics. Signing off.